Welcome to GM Tips, episode 4. This is an extension of the episode 3 video I did, which was all about combat, and this video really is just a few clarifications and corrections on the content of that video. So if you haven't watched that video, then probably head there, check it out. It's like a 30-minute, really long video, which is a deep dive into the combat subsystem in the One Ring. I cover pretty much everything in terms of the basics of combat. There are a few things I didn't go into. There's one or two things that I fudged a little bit just in order to keep it somewhat focused, and there's a couple of things I actually need to correct. So if you haven't watched that video, watch that one. For those of you who have and who've left comments and likes, that's great, thank you. It's really useful to get some feedback and hear that some of this is useful for you guys. So I'll continue to do stuff, but not to that kind of scale. I don't want to be doing 30-minute videos for you every time. So in this video, I'm just going to cover a couple of things. There's a clarification on called shots. I'm going to explain the knockback rule, which I didn't mention at all because it just slipped my mind in the first video. And I'm going to talk about fleeing and turn order. The last thing I'm going to cover is combat actions, although I'm not going to cover them in detail. I'm just going to sort of refer to them briefly. So the first thing for me to correct is stances. So something that I should have mentioned in the first video but didn't include is the stances determine the order in which the heroes attack. So from top to bottom, they are forward, open, defensive and rearward, and they will take their player turns in that order. So forward goes first, open goes second, defensive goes third, and rearward acts last in the player turns. So stances have a big impact there in terms of when you get to attack or take an action. The other thing that I'd like to mention around stances are that if you are in a rearward stance, you can flee the battlefield, you can flee the combat at the beginning of the round. So you don't have to make a roll, there's no test at all, you just announce that you're going to escape combat and you get to do that. If you're in any other stance, then you must take the escape combat action to do that, and that's going to be an athletics test. You obviously lose your opportunity to attack, and you can fail that escape combat test, so you'd end up stuck in combat. The second rule that I didn't mention at all in the first video and that I'd like to cover really briefly is the knockback rule. And the knockback rule allows a player to minimize or mitigate the endurance loss of an attack against them when it's been successful and they're about to lose endurance points. So they can choose to be knocked back and reduce the amount of endurance loss that they're taking by half, with any fractions rounded up. If they choose to do that, they, in the next combat round, they don't get to change their stance and they don't get to take a turn. So they lose the opportunity to attack or take an action. And in fact, they pretty much can't do anything. So you'd hope that their companions are going to rally around them and get them out of that situation. But obviously, if a hero is about to take a huge endurance loss of kind of 10 points or something, and maybe become weary or even unconscious, then that's a good option for them. So a little clarification on called shots. Thanks to Gustavo for pointing this one out. Called shots, when a player is attempting a called shot, they have to announce the called shot before they roll for their attack. They then need to roll a 6 in order and meet the target number in order for that called shot to succeed. If they fail the called shot, the attack just whiffs, it misses, and they don't get another chance that round to attack. If they fail it and they roll an Eye of Sauron, then that triggers a fumble. And a fumble means that when the enemies attack that hero in the next opportunity, so that round probably, they're going to use only the hero's stance target number, with no modifiers from their wits or any equipment that they might be carrying. So they lose all their bonuses. They're just going to be basic target number. If it's forward, it'll be 6. If it's open, it'll be 8, and so on. So that will also trigger a called shot by the enemy because they've rolled an Eye of Sauron during combat. One more clarification, it's a really small one, this one, but I think it's important that I use the right language and that we have a kind of shared understanding, so that when I'm referring to a rule, a mechanic in the game, that I'm using the right term so that everyone knows what it is I'm referring to. A critical hit, I think I referred to them as critical hits. The name for those is a piercing blow. So when a hero makes an attack and on the feat die rolls equal to or higher than their weapon's edge rating, that can injure the enemy. That's called a piercing blow. It's not called a critical hit or an injury. And I just wanted to clarify that one. Something else I'm really keen to explore a little bit that I didn't cover at all in the first video is combat tasks. And I might have been calling these combat actions. They are, in the rules, they're called combat tasks. So I'll try to only call them that. Now, combat tasks include things like protect companion, rally comrades, escape combat. And they generally involve some kind of a test, some kind of a roll. I think protect companion doesn't require a roll. Anyway, they replace the opportunity to attack that round for the hero, and allow that hero to achieve something fairly specific within combat. So, intimidate foe, for example, I think you use or battle. You roll. If you succeed, then you reduce an enemy's hate points, and that's really useful when you're faced with an enemy that's got some kind of ability that's the kind of source of the main problem in the combat. Rally comrades is really useful combat task in that it essentially heals everyone. Everyone gets an endurance point boost if they've lost endurance during that combat. And combat tasks can be upgraded during the fellowship phase by improving valor or wisdom. The best example I've got is the Rally Comrades combat task. We have a Minstrel of Rohan in our campaign, and he's upgraded Rally Comrades so that when he rides around singing a song of war, not only does he get to heal everyone and everyone gets an endurance boost, but he may then in that turn also make an attack. So that's a really powerful improvement for one combat task. I think in my experience at the start of the game, when players are just getting used to combat and how it plays, they're much more keen to just attack and use their weapons than they are to try out any combat tasks. As soon as they start dabbling with them and they realise that enemy abilities are fueled by hate and that they can reduce enemies' hate with intimidate foe, or if a companion has been knocked back and has lost their attack that round, then possibly they want to use protect companion. There are loads of uses for combat tasks, and the more players play, the more they tend to discover that there's more to combat than just linear he hits, I hit, he hits, I hit. The Adventurer's Companion expands the combat tasks significantly. So Again, I'll give this another recommendation. I think it's a really good book for just expanding base combat. And yeah, combat tasks are really good. I like them. I think that's about it. It's just a few little bits that I wanted to add to that episode 3 combat basics video. There's a lot more to be said about combat. I think mass combat is a video in itself, kind of making combat interesting, making it impactful, thinking about what the purpose of combat is. That's probably another subject entirely. I haven't covered states of health yet. I fudged that a little bit in the basics video because it's quite a big subject and it sort of hurts my brain to think about it in any detail. But I will cover that in a future video if it's useful for you guys. I know a few people have been asking for something about journeys. They've been asking for advice on journeys. I think that's a really good subject to cover. I'd love to get my teeth into that one. So yeah, I'll definitely cover that in a future video. But for now, thanks for watching. Keep your comments coming and keep telling me, what you think, what you want to see, and I'll try and cover it. Cheers.